All right, hello. It is Monday, September 22nd, and got a lot of stuff to do this week. I have to finish getting the the footprints and all the 40k terrain together for our tournament this weekend. Um, then, well, maybe before that even, I have to get the board for this week's Death Wizards campaign ready to go. Not 100% sure what I'm going to do for that yet. I have to look at what missions they are, uh, and then we'll go from there. Then I have to get my warband ready for that game. And then I have a game on Friday. I need to figure out what army I'm going to play for that. I think it's going to be ogres for the old world, but we'll have to see based on some of the other stuff I have to do. Not sure what I'm doing today though. Something in the realm of one of those projects, but not exactly sure what yet, but you'll find out in just a second. Alrighty, so I am going to plan out the two missions for this week's Death Wizards campaign meetup. And so we have Ritual up here at the top, and then we have Graveyard. So both of these have official terrain layouts. I'll put them right here somewhere. Starting with Ritual, and then moving on to Graveyard in a minute. And I'm going to use that as sort of a baseline for what I set up, but I'm not going to stick to it exactly, mostly because, well, for one, the players can all see the whole rulebook, obviously, and so, I don't want them to know necessarily every piece of information that is in every mission, and so switching up the terrain from what's in the book will mean that some of it is a little bit of a surprise ahead of time. But in addition to that, because we have two teams running on the same board, I'm going to have to switch it up a little bit. So for the Ritual, let me get a second sheet of paper here, actually. So this is the actual Ritual. So in the actual Ritual, if this is your board, there's a forest right here. The players start here. The enemies start here, and there's a ritual site right there. Ritual site, and then there's like a house right here. So that's the initial, and then you roll for a piece of terrain here and a piece of terrain here. What I'm doing, and this is a 30 by 22 inch board. And so what we're doing is we're playing on a 3 by 3. So it'll be like this. We're playing on this. So I am going to take this ritual site and put it in the middle. So we'll have that here. Ritual site. And then one player group will start here. Players. And the other will start here. And then I think what I'm going to do is I'll put the houses, I'll put a couple houses out like around here, give or take. And then the enemies that are aligned against this player group will start here, and the enemies that are aligned against this player group will start somewhere in there. And then I am going to do a forest right here in front of the two zones. I think, so as you can see, this one is right in between the players and the ritual zone. I think that's to make them go out and around and not be able to shoot immediately. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to put a forest right in front of both player groups. And then I'm just going to put some more trees, in and around out here. Most of the action should be here. Like there'll be players going here, going here, going here, and going here. So the action shouldn't really ever be out here, but I'm going to put some trees out here just to, keep it fun and interesting. And then one of the mechanics that we have to keep in mind is that if one player group finishes early, they can help the other group. So, but, if this group is moving faster and they finish on turn 4, if this group is only on turn 3, these guys can't go help. But as soon as they get to turn 4, now this player group can go help. So there's sort of like an imaginary line going through here until one group wins, and then they can cross the line on the turn that the other group is on and help them out. So I have to keep that in mind. I do have to keep like some space clear here so that people can go back and forth if that comes up. Hopefully, they'll just both stay on the same turn and they'll both win roughly at the same time and it'll be fine. But in case it happens, I will leave that open. So then we have the graveyard, which the graveyard is actually, I'll put it out here, but it's very similar. So you have, again, this is the 22 by 30. In this one, you have the players starting here, and then you have these crags right there, kind of blocking their zone. And then you have a graveyard down here with some houses, and the heroes start kind of here, or heroes. They're called heroes because you're technically the bad guys. But the enemies start down here, and you have to get around and stop them. So, same idea as the ritual site. I'm going to do... Oh, well, we're not playing... No, it doesn't matter. This is just a rough drawing. It doesn't make a difference. We're playing again on a 36 by 36. I will again put the graveyard in the middle. So this is the graveyard. One player group here, one player group here. But then the crags are sort of interesting. So I'm going to probably do crags like this, right here, to force these players to go here. And then I'm going to do the same thing, crag, to force these players to go like that. I want to do this because hypothetically, no players will be going like this and crossing in and confusing this area, or like this and crossing in and confusing this area. Hypothetically, each group will be completely separated, while still maintaining the feel of the original by putting the crags there. If I just put the crags where they are, then you may have some players going like this, and some like this, and then some like this, and some like this. And these two groups here, this group and this group, are going to be like half of this one and half of this one. And it's going to be confusing, like, oh, which turn are we on, which turn are they on? So I want to try to separate them as much as possible. So I'm just going to do the line of crags going along here and along here to really separate the groups. And that's something you need to keep in mind for this sort of thing. You know, if this group is playing faster than this group, you don't want them to be intermingled and like, all right, I'm on turn 4, but he's only on turn 3, and she's casting her spell on the like second activation of turn 4, but I'm ready to start the first activation of turn 5, and so, you know, you want to keep that in mind when you're doing something like this. I'm not sure how often people are going to be doing something like this, but, you know, it comes up. I'm quite familiar with things like this from running games at conventions. Often, you know, I've run big games at conventions, like 16 people, and so if you have a convention game, big old table, and you have like 8 people on a side. So the game I've most often run that's big is a ship game. So, you know, everybody has a boat and they're going along, and by the time, you know, they're in the middle of the game and the boats are out here, and people are doing combat and they're shooting and all that, a lot of the time what we will end up doing is cutting the board in half. These people can go on if they're done. If, like, instead of waiting for these people to finish the turn, if they're done, they can just go on. You just have to keep in mind, though, when anyone crosses this line, you got to figure out what's going to happen. So this will make sure that it's very hard to cross that line, and then I don't even have to think about it. All right, so that planning is all done. I'll probably pull out the terrain and figure out exactly what I'm going to use for it and stuff later in the week, maybe even Thursday morning. And I'm going to pull the models out probably tomorrow. I need paladins, wizards, priests, and warriors, I think. Definitely paladins and wizards. So I'll have to think about that. But yeah, that whole thing about like making sure your players, you know, if players cross that imaginary line, what to do, that got me thinking about sort of like when you're hosting a game, think about the fact that this is especially true for a game that you have a lot of players in. Think about the fact that players may be moving at variable speeds. You know, someone might be very familiar with the rules and they can bop through 5 turns in an hour. Some people might be less familiar, and so they might need an hour for 3 turns. So keep that in mind. Keep thinking about ways that you can let the players who are quicker keep going without messing up the whole game, and think about how you can, not discourage the people who are slower in thinking that they're ruining the game for other people. And in that vein, sort of in general, think about how your players are going to break your system. And not even like, obviously I didn't write these rules for Death Wizards, so I'm not concerned if somebody finds a spell combo that like completely breaks the game. That's not my concern. That's for Snarling Badger to figure out. That's not for me to figure out. But since I'm changing the board size and I'm changing the terrain layout a little bit, I need to be thinking about how are players going to, not even necessarily on purpose, exploit this that could be detrimental to the group's fun or, whatever. So just be thinking about that if you're hosting a game with a lot of people. How can you plan for the system to break down, as it were, and what can you do to mitigate that before the game starts? This is also something I need to be thinking about coming up here because of our big D Day, or not D Day. I keep saying D Day because we did D Day last year, uh, or we did D Day last time, not last year, a couple months ago. Our last bolt action game was a couple months ago. It was D Day. We're doing Battle of the Bulge, and I need to keep it in mind. That sort of same thing about how are the players going to break the system? How can I plan for that? How can I make sure it doesn't happen? Um, and again, not in that they're going to break the system in an exploitative way, but just like if my system is every player will take their turn, and then the other team, all the players will take their turn, and then the other team will go, and blah 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 blah. Well, breaking of that system, as I drop my phone, uh, breaking of that system might be that three of the players are very experienced and they move through it very fast. Now they're sitting and waiting while the other five players take their slower turn. So, thinking about ways to mitigate that, thinking about who the players are that are participating in your game, how much experience they have, and positioning them in such a way that if I need to, I can break these couple players off. They can do their own thing. The less experienced players can do their own thing, things like that. But even like, if you have a very experienced bolt action player, say, and a less experienced bolt action player, if you line them up across from each other, that might not be so fun for either of them in a big game like that. So I need to keep this stuff in mind for our big game that we're going to do in December. So this Death Wizards thing will help. And the Death Wizards campaign is lower stakes because it's not player versus player. All the players are on the same team. We're fighting against just the AI of the game. So in that sense, I don't have to think about it as much, but it will help me, practice and think about these things when the big bolt action game comes up, which is a much bigger deal than just a random one-off Death Wizards game. But that will do it for this episode. Kind of just a talking episode, but that's okay. That's just kind of what I was doing today in the hobby and where my brain was at. So sometimes that'll happen. Thank you everybody for watching. If you enjoyed the video, I would encourage you to click the like button, subscribe to the channel if you want to see more videos like this, and I will see you tomorrow.